Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And we are delighted and excited to go deep and unwind. We have a lot of interesting things to talk about today. My guest today is John Fawkes, who is an NSCA certified personal trainer under Precision Nutrition Level 1 nutritional coach and the managing editor of the Unwinder, a website dedicated to unwinding the truth behind health and wellness products. And what's really interesting about John, he, like me, has shared a passion for traveling the world and unusual experiences. If you check out his Instagram or Facebook, you'll see some very cool photos. He gets into a lot of different things, including EEG headsets, brain hacks, nootropics, full body workouts, the ketogenic diet, hacking inflammation, and cortisol management. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be on here, Wade.
Well, hey, I guess a lot of people who might not be familiar with the Unwinder website and your mission in life, maybe you can kind of share with us, why did you create the Unwinder, and maybe what was the background and leading you to create that site, maybe your history and how you got started in the industry and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so I wasn't the original founder of the site. I was brought on not long after it was founded by a couple other guys named Alex and Brandon. But they wanted to create a site that talks about health topics, and in particular supplements, in a way that is really backed by science, that references studies, there's just kind of no BS, and that kind of overcomes some of the incentive problems in writing about particularly that stuff, namely that you have almost no incentive to ever write anything bad about anything, because you make money off affiliate links, which means you make money by writing good reviews, not bad ones. That incentive issue is still there, but it was like, well, let's be honest. And if we have anything bad to say, we'll chalk that up to this article is to build our credibility more so than to make money. So they brought me on because I have a history of writing very evidence-based articles. I'm in what's called the evidence-based fitness community, which is a fancy way of saying people who directly reference published studies rather than popular articles about studies. So they brought me on because I'm good at writing about health and fitness topics in a researched, informed manner and citing my sources. So I'm not the president of the website. I'm the managing editor. I kind of lead the editorial policy there, do some of the writing, all the editing. But yeah, the goal of the Unwinder is to give people kind of honest advice about mainly supplements, some other health topics like exercise equipment, and also to be at the cutting edge of talking about kind of new things that are starting to get discussed in niche circles, and kind of be one of the people who brings them mainstream. For instance, right now that's longevity, like senolytics. It's kind of it's a thing that's very exclusive to biohackers right now. So we kind of want to be at the cutting edge of bringing those discussions mainstream, with the caveat that sometimes when you're the first, the honest thing to say is, well, we don't know that much. We got to wait for more research. But again, commitment to honesty with the trust that, if you're honest, you will make money one way or another. But, they started it, and I agree with this mission because they found that there is a lot of hype around supplements, in particular around health topics, and is very rarely backed by evidence. And there are very few good sources of information that are not directly from someone selling the very thing they're talking about. And the thing is, and that's not to say that anyone who is selling something can't be trusted, but sometimes they can, sometimes they can't,
Correct.
And the ones who, and if they can, the way that is usually that they cite the evidence. So it's not terribly hard to tell who can be trusted, who can't, but there's still a need for independent independent sources of information. And one thing that even an honest supplement company won't usually do is they won't explain why they don't sell the things they don't sell. It's just, honesty aside, it's usually a bit too off topic. So that's the other thing we want to really get into, is saying, well, here's a thing that's popular. Here's why we don't recommend it so much.
Great stuff. I know years ago when I was first I was probably about maybe 6-7 years into my training and nutritional career. I was a student, took exercise physiology, and then became a sports nutrition educator and a personal trainer in my own career. And then I ran a supplement store, and I was approached by a group of business people who wanted me to develop a fat burning formula. And so something that would aid in, abating appetite, suppressing appetite, and potentially improving your capabilities if you're on a dietary supplement program in combination with the diet. And so you had to write a book, and it was the dummies book. And so you write a book, and then they dumbify the book, and then you build a supplement. And then I traveled around, and I remember it was the most shocking journey I've ever done in my life. We went to a manufacturer. First, we went to a major university, and everybody would recognize this university. Met with the department head, and he told us that for $100,000, he would generate a study that would support what we wanted to do. And I was like sitting there in the meeting going, they would assign it to some master students in his department, and they would do the experiments on some bugs or something, and there it would be. And then later that day, I flew to Southern California to a company that was producing a bunch of just nutritional supplements, probably about 30% of the supplements in the United States at the time. It was a very big organization, and I met with the PhD that was running the lab. And so I asked him offhand, we toured the plant, and I said, so which of these products do you take? We'll get to you in a second. And he's like, oh, I don't take any of them. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't take any of them? He's like, yeah, I don't know these sources. I mean, I don't know if it's contaminated. And I was just blown away. Now, this is around the year 2000. And then I met with the board, the people that were putting the project together, and the conversation was about how much margin they could get, how they would do the marketing, all this sort of stuff. And I opted out of the quote unquote opportunity, which is a kind of an interesting word to use. And I said, I'm out. And 3 years later, when we started our supplement company, Matt and I made a pact that we would only be mission-based regardless. And, it's a harder sell for a supplement company when you start out. And what I've found, the best supplement companies are usually owners who have had some problem or some issue to solve on their own. They went through and sorted through the wheat from the chaff, and then found out, hey, here's where we can get something. And they make a product for a small group of people. And if they're lucky enough, they can scale and go through the growing pains and build a decent company. And it's fascinating to see. But what attracted you to this industry? What was your background maybe that got you into this style of education for the public? Because it's a great service.
Yeah. Well, I started my fitness blog back when I was working at an ad agency, and I just wasn't happy in my job, and I needed an escape from it. So I just started writing. And I certainly didn't get started in the evidence-based fitness world. I got started in the more traditional, I'm an experienced trainer, so believe what I tell you because I'm experienced world. And after I started this blog, of course, I started researching a lot of other blogs and websites, because when you're a new blogger, part of the way you grow your blog is by guest posting for other people. And so I think that's how I first found it, was when I was like, oh, I need to guest post for people, time to research other blogs. And I came across, a few people whose just their blog articles were full of like links to like studies on PubMed, like the actual studies. And I was like, oh shit, well, why doesn't everyone do this? This is the way stuff should be written, cite the evidence. And I was just an instant convert. And I think it's the most honest and informative way to talk about health, but it is one that demands more of the audience. I mean, it is one that you have to expect the audience to actually read the studies you're citing, because if they don't do that, it's not actually any better than just saying, just trust me. I mean, and there are, by the way, I've seen people, and I see this plenty at the Unwinder as we're researching sources for articles, is I see other sites will cite studies and then they'll misrepresent what the study says. Like the study will say one thing, they'll say something else. It's either the opposite of what the study says or just kind of unrelated. Like I saw one the other day, I don't remember what website it was, but they cited a source saying vanilla could do, I forget what they were saying vanilla extract could do, but you read the study and it's vanilla flavored nicotine. Like it wasn't vanilla at all, it was nicotine. Like it has nothing to do with anything you're talking about.
I think this is a great topic because I think there's a lot of research driven experts out there, or so there would be a small group of research, and I would say there's an interesting relation. There's research, then there's applied research. So how does this research translate into the real world? And then there's the part of how do you determine the real research from the bogus research? And so I would love to know your methodology for first sorting through what might be cited in an article or reference or information, and then second, how you take that information and then maybe apply it directly in someone's fitness program or your own stuff. Like what's your methodology around that? I think that would be valuable for people to know.
In terms of figuring out which research to trust or what to take away from it?
Yeah, correct. So, because I'll give you an example. So way back in the day when I was in university, this was before the internet, and we had to actually go to the library, we would have to research a vitamin or a mineral. And unfortunately, I remember my first time in there, it was shocking to me. I was 18 years old going into the research lab, and then you'd see, all these articles supporting vitamin D supplementation, and then all these articles saying that you shouldn't do vitamin D supplementation, it was worthless. And then I was sitting there going, okay, I recognized immediately I was not equipped with the discerning factor at that point in my career. I had to determine which was legit. So how do you ferret through legit research and apply it in the real world?
Yeah. So first off, I wouldn't say, I mean, a lot of studies are legit and still lead to the wrong conclusion.
Right.
I mean, first off, look at the sum total of research, not any one study. I think a lot of people have this misconception that new research replaces old research. New research really adds to old research. It's another piece of data. Second, look at sample sizes. Smaller sample sizes make a study more likely to find no significant correlation or no significant difference between groups. And by the way, the reverse is not true. A lot of people think that if a study does find something, that it finds a significant correlation. Well, a small sample size makes that less valid. Wrong. A small sample size means the effect size had to be bigger to overcome that to be significant. So, that's already, if there is a positive result, the effects of a small sample size have already been accounted for. A small sample size makes a study more likely to find nothing. Whereas a big sample size means a result can be significant statistically, but actually just not really be all that big. So make sure you keep those things straight. Second, look at what they were doing, how big of a dosage or of whatever it was, whether it's medicine, exercise they were using. With vitamin D, I mean, and how long the study went for. With vitamin D, you can get studies doing 1,000 IU, you can get studies doing 10,000 IU. And with vitamin D, I don't know which studies particularly you're talking about, but because it's fat soluble, it builds up in the body slowly over time. if you have a low dosage and a short length of the study and a small sample size, you're not going to find much because you honestly did not do much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is something where you need like 5 or 10,000 units a day for weeks to really see. I mean, maybe longer, 5 or 10,000 units a day for a couple of weeks to see your blood vitamin D levels go up. Actual health results from that, probably longer.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is apply some Bayesian reasoning, meaning accept that you're going to probabilistic reasoning, I should say, accept
Right.
that you're ultimately going to have to make a probabilistic decision. Meaning with the vitamin D example, if you come out of this thinking there's a 60% chance that taking vitamin D will help me, a 40% chance that it's kind of going to be a wash, a vanishingly small chance that it'll be bad for me, and vitamin D is so cheap it's practically free, accept the uncertainty and take the vitamin D,
Mm-hmm.
So it's part of life is being able to make probabilistic decisions in situations of uncertainty like that. Another similar example when it comes to weightlifting is training frequency. I think everyone who reads the research at this point knows you need to train every muscle at least twice a week. I mean, I think anyone who's been following it knows the traditional once a week thing is too little. Beyond twice a week, there is some doubt. I'm more of a high frequency guy. There are some studies saying that high frequencies are better. There are some studies saying they're not better. There aren't really any studies saying higher frequencies are worse. So again, can't say I'm 100% sure, might as well go with higher frequencies. It at least doesn't hurt. And again, that's another thing with the studies that find no difference. You can often chalk it up to small sample size because they're in exercise studies, you almost always have small sample sizes mainly because there's not a lot of funding for them, because unlike drugs or even supplements, there are no corporations almost ever that have an incentive to fund them, which means the funding is coming from just kind of the government, from colleges, from pure research organizations, but no one who has a commercial interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kind of limits the resources available.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I know we're working with a research team, some PhDs in microbiome. We believe in the potential of developing new strains of probiotics to deal with the frankenbugs that have emerged from antibiotic resistant strains and things like that. And so we're conducting a whole array of kind of, hey, well, what happens if we blast them with EMFs, and what happens if we give them this food, and what happens so it can be really fun. But it's been a long time before we've been able to get into a position where we can actually have a lab and have PhDs actually doing stuff and dream up crazy experiments, and someone that actually knows how to make an experiment that's going to produce some directional components. I think you touched on something, which is really important. And I call it, I was on a call with Dave Asprey not that long ago, and we were talking about stacking the deck in your favor, or taking, probabilistic thinking, which is essentially what biohacking really is. It's like, okay, well, if the life expectancy here, for use round numbers, is 80, and the New England Journal of Medicine says that the disability adjusted life expectancy in North America is 60. And the Surgeon General says that 90% of the conditions that people are suffering from are lifestyle related. Well, it looks like at the very minimum, we should be able to, with pretty good accuracy, mitigate and increase the quality of our life during that 20 years, and then potentially extend the quality of our life beyond the adjusted life expectancy. So how would you, because you talked earlier about kind of getting into this, biohacking around aging, living a long time. What's your thought process around that in stacking the deck in your favor in regards to these things?
I mean, I would start out by handling I'm going to assume that I'm answering this for someone who's under 60. They have a
Yes.
bit of time. They have enough time to wait for more research to come out if they take care of themselves.
Right.
Because it's different if you are very old, then it's like panic button, take a risk or you're going to die, you know?
Right.
Because that's, again, me as a 36-year-old, I look at the research, it's incomplete. I say, I'm not going to take a bunch of drugs. I'm going to wait 5 more years.
Me too.
Fundamentals, sleep, diet, exercise. The research is overwhelming. You should eat way more fruits and vegetables, especially vegetables. Sleep about 7 to 9 hours a night. A lot of people think 8+. The research actually says about 7 to 9 for most people. Although there is evidence that you can benefit from more sleep the more you exercise. Like there was a study on college basketball players that did better, with 10+ hours a night. Sleep more, exercise. From a longevity standpoint, I would say a mix of cardio and weights. And make sure you got all your micronutrients covered. I would get tested for vitamins and minerals, see if you're deficient in any of them.
What testing do you like? What testing you like on that?
I don't have a favorite company or anything. I just kind of go say, look, test all my vitamins and minerals. I know people say SpectraCell is good. I have to be honest, I haven't investigated like which is the best method. I just haven't taken the time to do that.
I use SpectraCell
Yeah.
Under the guidance of my ND, and I like because it shows not only deficiencies but where you may have trouble absorbing, like how your body absorbs. So it's not just serum levels, it's what's going on at the cellular level, which is really great. Continue on. This is great stuff.
But with regards to that, test 2 or 3 times months apart. Particularly, nutrients can either be water soluble or fat soluble. If they're water soluble, your blood levels are not very stable at all. They can vary a lot from day to day. So like vitamin D I mentioned earlier is fat soluble. If you test it today and tomorrow, you're going to get similar results both times. Other things like vitamin A, water soluble, it's a crapshoot. You can't read too much into any one test. So you just got to test a few times and take some combination of the averages and the trend, So for longevity, I would do all that. Beyond that, there's a lot of interesting kind of hacking stuff like this. I know you've read the quercetin and dasatinib study that came out earlier. I think it was last year, but it was senolytics, so a drug combo to kill senescent cells. But it was very promising, although it was specifically in very elderly people with diabetic kidney disease, I believe it was. Having said that, the loss of senescent cells was not just in their kidneys. Like they also saw a reduction of senescent cells in their skin, which is.
You want to explain senescent cells to our audience?
I should. Yeah, senescent cells are basically. Senescence means kind of old and useless, not old and disabled, I should say. So it's when your body's cells get really old. Well, a few ways cells can go senescent. One is they can just hit a limit of how many times they can divide, replicate. I think that's the Hayflick limit, if I'm not mixing that up with something.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was thinking, is that something from astronomy? No, the Hayflick, which is about like 40 or 50 times, and then they'll go senescent. Another thing that can happen, if they get cancer, a lot of times cells will go senescent as a defensive mechanism, or if if get a lot of toxins in them, various external toxins. And it's not a bad thing to have a few senescent cells. There is some evidence that they serve productive purposes in low amounts. But as you get older, you end up with too many of them. So part of your immune system, the natural killer cells, do try to kill senescent cells to keep their numbers low. And as you get older, that mechanism kind of gets overwhelmed because on the one hand, more and more cells go senescent, the pace of that picks up, and at the same time, the number of natural killer cells goes down. So this particular study directly killed senescent cells by using a combination of a leukemia drug and a very common dietary supplement for just 3 days. Very promising again, and probably not too risky because it's only 3 days of the same dosage that leukemia patients take for years. Having said that, A, you wouldn't want to overdo it. B, if you're young, no reason not to wait a bit longer, see more research. You can also reduce your senescent cell load by increasing your natural killer cell count. There are a lot of supplements that can do that, but a healthy lifestyle probably does more. I mean, that's more of an overall health thing. And you can also reduce the rate at which, I mean, there are various ways to prevent cells from going senescent in the first place. Although that, I don't know that you would necessarily want to do that because they often go senescent for good reasons. The way I describe it is when cells go senescent, it's like that scene in a zombie movie where someone gets bitten, so he shoots himself. It's like, oh, now I'm a danger to the rest of the body. I gotta disable myself. So you don't necessarily want to prevent that from happening. And that's one of the reasons I'm slow to join the kind of setalytics train, is not just because I'm wondering whether it works, but because I'm wondering to what degree do you actually want to reduce your senescent cell load? And are there downsides to reducing it too quickly? Like, for instance, in your skin, and the skin, I believe, is the part of the body that tends to have the highest senescent cell load the earliest in life. I mean, that's a big part of why you get wrinkly is because of senescent cells. So I'm wondering if you kill too many of them all at once, I mean, if that many skin cells dying all at once, is that going to be a structural issue where you just have all of a sudden the skin collapsing in on itself where those cells used to be? I don't know.
Could it trigger other? It also could
Yeah.
it trigger other metabolic response mechanisms? Like, who knows? We don't know. Sometimes when we're studying this stuff, we don't know like what's the trigger event that could activate a kind of an unmitigated cascade towards death versus an upregulation to an extended of life, because that's the unfortunate part of compartmentalization things, right?
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing about longevity research is it takes a long time to do, at least on long-lived species like humans, which is why we can study. And this study I'm talking about, by the way, another reason I'm not reading too much into it, the only outcomes they looked at were senescent cell load. They didn't go beyond that, at least yet. They could do a follow-up study on the same people, I guess, but they didn't go beyond that and look at health outcomes like, did these people lose weight? Did they have a better resting heart rate? Did they have better VO2 max or exercise capacity? Is their subjective quality of life better? None of that. All it proved is that their senescent cell load went down. We're left to assume that meant good things for them health-wise, which I think it probably did. But again, because they were diabetics with kidney disease, I also can't generalize too much from them to everyone else. And so there's a ton of research on senescence, and it's almost all in like worms, flies, sometimes rats. And so one thing about longevity research is I would not, those very small life forms don't live very long. They live, rats, maybe a couple of years, worms, flies, less than a year. And so the degree to which you can generalize from small animals to bigger, longer-lived ones is pretty limited. So I think that the purpose of that kind of longevity research on flies is to provide ideas for what you should then research on bigger animals, including humans. But you can't jump directly from this worked on flies, so it'll work on humans.
So to kind of go through a couple of things based on the research that you've kind of established. Now, you said something in here that's very interesting, because I've noticed right now there's a trend around longevity and things like that a lot of people are going to a ketogenic type style diet, and then you're citing vegetables and fruits as something that's probably to help. So can you kind of unpack that a little bit for our listeners? Because interesting enough, my business partner is a ketogenic guy and I'm a plant-based guy. And so we are what many people would see as opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'd love to know how you see this picture.
Yeah, as far as the ketogenic diet, I mean, it's a great tool for weight loss. Mainly, I mean, we have more research on it now. There's still, weight loss is still calories in, calories out. There's no hacking around it. Having said that, the ketogenic diet is great for weight loss. First and foremost, it seems to suppress your appetite. And I think, and a lot of people will feel that, by the way, just from taking ketone supplements without even going on the diet. Like I had some lemonade with raspberry ketones in it just an hour ago. It kills my appetite. And actually, in my case, I've done the ketogenic diet for weight loss, and it's too much for me. Like when I really stick to it, I have a hard time even eating 1,000 calories a day. Now, this, by the way, I'm muscular now. I was very skinny as a kid. So my gut takeaway from that I can't really prove is that if you are a person whose tendency is to be underweight or who has historically been very skinny, the ketogenic diet is likely to have that effect that you'll not even eat enough on it. But the ketogenic diet is great for weight loss for a lot of people. The effect, I would, if you go on it for more than a few months, start getting your lipids tested, your cholesterol, your triglycerides. The effects that it can have on those are just kind of all over the place. Yes. Some people find they get better. Some people find they get worse. And it doesn't seem to strongly correlate to body type. I think it's probably more of a genetic thing, just in terms of some people process high carb diets better. Some people do better on high fat diets. And that's a thing you can get tested. I mean, it's partly genetic, it's partly body type, but there is a gene for, I mean, more than one gene, but there are genes for how well your body processes high carb versus high fat. Off the top of my head, I can't name them. I actually did, though. I got a DNA test years ago before I found out about this gene. And then when I read about it, I went back to 23andMe and was like, oh, okay, I actually have the high carb genetics. Cool. That said, ketogenic diet was great for me for fat loss. I did lose muscle on it because I was just so fatigued and so under eating. So I think it's just kind of a try it and see how it works for you thing. But the other thing I will say about fruits and vegetables, you still want to eat vegetables on the ketogenic diet and a little bit of fruit to the extent you can. I think a lot of people have the idea that your goal on the keto diet is to be as deep into ketosis as possible, to absolutely minimize the carbs and maximize the ketones. And that is, I think people are conflating kind of health and fitness ketosis with medical ketosis. So keto is used for some medical conditions, in particular epilepsy. And if you're using it for that purpose, yes, you want to go as deep into ketosis as possible, because the deeper into ketosis you go, the more your symptoms are going to improve. Now, if you're doing keto for general health and for weight loss, it's not that. You actually don't want to, you don't want to sacrifice protein and vegetables just for the sake of going deeper into ketosis, because that is mixing up means and ends. The ketosis is a means to an end. What you really want to do is eat as much protein and as many vegetables and maybe even fruits as you can without breaking ketosis. In other words, get the benefits without sacrificing the things that tend to get sacrificed on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And I think that's where I think biohacking, taking the research and then running your own tests so you got the N of 1 on yourself to kind of, number one, kind of tweak out. For example, I'll give you a great example. A lot of people in the ketogenic diet use coconut oil. My business partner who lives in Panama found that if he used coconut oil, it kept his triglycerides high. He wiped out the coconut oil and his triglycerides came down. And so he was able to maintain. So that was a variation. Myself, I'm a carb guy. And so my ketones are often in the levels of a ketogenic dieter while I'm eating while I'm on a carbohydrate diet. And so I'm, we're two guys in the same company that have vast differences, and his blood sugar regulation is much different. There's also adaptive responses the longer you go. So for example, people who have done ketogenic for maybe a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll much quicker go back into ketosis if they cycle off. And it would seem that it seems to be most people do best if they cycle in and out of keto during various parts of the years, which would seem more like seasonal dieting. I don't know. We're still learning.
I think that's right. Partly because it's hard to get enough vitamins and fruits and vegetables on keto. So I think most people, and I do know some people who stay on it pretty much permanently. I think most people kind of go on and off it every few months, which is different, by the way, from the cyclical ketogenic diet where you kind of carb up every week or so, which is, I guess, an okay thing to do if you want to. The thing is, you get out of ketosis, you have this switchover period where you're getting the worst of both worlds. You're maybe getting the keto flu. So I don't advocate doing that kind of carb up too often. And one problem I had, I ended up doing it really often just to balance out my calories so they weren't too low. But that sacrificed so many of the benefits of doing keto in the first place. And I think most people know this, but you can get something called the keto flu where you just kind of feel fatigued and dizzy when you're transitioning into ketosis from being out of it. The degree to which that happens varies from person to person. It is actually, to me, is both a downside and an upside. Obviously, a downside, it feels terrible, and it makes it hard to cycle in and out of ketosis on a high frequency basis like the CKD. Why I consider it partly an upside, if you're a person who has trouble being disciplined with dieting, it can be an upside for you because it punishes you for breaking the diet. So that is, I have had clients who've expressed an interest in keto, and they said, it's a pretty extreme diet and I'm worried because I'm not very disciplined. I'm like, okay, well, good. This diet punishes you for breaking it. That's an upside.
Yes.
So if you're someone who needs to build discipline and who needs to just be slapped on the wrist when you break your diet, the keto diet does that for you. So that can be an advantage for some people.
What are some other things that I would say, let's maybe dive a little bit more into how, because I think you've got such a good basis in research and information and being able to sort out things. What are the things that you do on a daily basis that's going to, you feel, contribute to living long and living strong?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
On a daily basis, the biggest thing is having a strict, well, not strict, but a consistent sleep schedule. I've developed an evening routine where the last hour before bed, I will read, TV off, reading. And the hour before that, I will not be working or playing video games or anything like that. Maybe still reading, maybe TV, but nothing too stimulating. So I think having a consistent sleep schedule is really the kind of the anchor that everything else in your life kind of orbits around. In that respect, COVID-19's been great because I'm like, there's no bars, no clubs. There's not too much to pull me away from that. Having a morning routine for the first hour of your day is important too. Get to a running start. In practice, there should be no reason why you can't screw around in the morning, or in theory, there should be no reason why you can't screw around in the morning and kind of still have a productive workday after that. In practice, it never works. It's like,
right.
If I waste the morning, I'm like, well, this day's blown. I don't catch up in the afternoon. It just doesn't happen. So I've developed a morning routine, which is, I can't just hop out of bed and get to work, but I spend my first hour having a little tea, either reading the news or a book. And then after that, I'm off to work,
Are you like a 10 o'clock at night guy, 6 in the morning? Or are you like...
No, it's funny. As a kid, I was an extreme night owl. I'd want to go to bed at 4 a.m. And the older I've gotten, the earlier that's been pushed back. So now my bedtime is about midnight.
Yeah.
Lately, it's sometimes been a little earlier, but I'm usually about a midnight to 8 guy.
There's the Chronotypes book. Have you seen that one about different people have different sleep cycles, and kind of learning your own sleep cycles a good value? Like, I'm an early morning guy.
Yeah.
Matt's a late night guy, right? So we build our schedules out around those things.
Yeah. Now, I don't know to what extent that is genetic versus kind of has to do with kind of light in your environment. I think it's a bit of both. In my case, there's clearly been an age component to it as well. So I'm always wary of presenting this as something about yourself that you can't change, because I can easily become more of a night guy if I keep the lights on, if I have more caffeine, if I do more stimulating things in the evening. I mentioned video games as something I don't do before bed because they are the perfect storm of everything that will keep you awake. You're looking at a screen that's blasting light into your eyes. You're performing an activity that in most cases has no defined endpoint. Most games are designed to not have an endpoint. They want you playing more and more. It's mentally stimulating, but not mentally fatiguing the way that working can be. And it's the kind of thing, if it's a fun game, when you stop playing, you can be like, oh, I should have done this. What if I'd done this? It can keep you up. It's everything that'll keep you up, right? So if I drink a bunch of caffeine and play video games in the evening, I can be up until 2 and I'm a night owl now. But it's something I did, So my chronotype is pretty flexible between about 11 p.m. and 2 or 3 a.m. depending on what I do. Beyond that, there's not much flex. I can't force myself to go to sleep much before 11 unless I either am sick or take a bunch of edibles or something.
Right.
And I can't force myself to stay up beyond 2 or 3 without stimulants or an afternoon nap or something. But within that window of about 4 hours, I have some wiggle room depending on how I structure my day. So I think just bear in mind, this is partly something you can influence. The other thing is,
beyond, you got anything else on sleep?
Oh, no, I thought we were going to circle back to productivity habits, having a good day.
Yeah,
that's a lot of that is keeping your workspace kind of ready for work, uncluttered. In my case, I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment right now. I was in a studio before, and I moved to a 1-bedroom that has a lot more space. And it helped tremendously because I have more room to keep my workspace uncluttered, separate from my eating space, separate from my playing space. Makes a big difference. Working standing up helps a lot. I find if I sit down for too long, I get like antsy. I want to just kind of get up and pace around. So I will alternate between working sitting down and kind of just standing at my kitchen counter here with my laptop up on the counter. And I'll try to work standing up as much as I can until my feet or my legs start to get a little fatigued, and I'll sit down for a bit. And I actually discovered this way back when I was in my day job at the ad agency. You're more alert, you think faster when you're standing up. And so it's worth thinking about what kinds of work that's going to be useful for versus sitting down, you're more relaxed. So I was the director of business development. So I would stand up anytime I had to do phone calls, because you're in a live conversation with someone, you have to think faster. Having said that, I am sitting down right now, but I'd stand up for phone calls. I'd sit down when I was doing emails or anything else. So I would kind of just game that system. Like, when do I need to be relaxed? When do I need to be thinking faster on my feet? Standing up more throughout the day does help you sleep better too.
Yeah, I have a standing desk here that I stand at most of the time, and then sometimes when we're on team calls or something, I have a little bike that I can slide under the desk, and I'll just kind of do a slow biking cardio. And some people do walking stuff, and I always prefer to actually be standing up for especially communication style things where I'm involved in verbal fluency. I find I get a more of a rhythm when I'm standing than when I'm sitting. So I guess everybody's got to kind of work things. What are some other things that you're doing on a daily basis to kind of optimize your health in longevity?
I mean, working out, I do full body workouts nearly every day.
Wow. So tell me about those.
I mean, they're short. Usually I go to the gym. Sometimes I'll work out at home, but I try to work out all the movement patterns every day. So that's upper body pushing and pulling, kind of squat style movements, hinge style movements, meaning like deadlifts, something with my abs. So on a day when I don't have a lot of energy, this might be about a 15-minute, 12 or 15 sets, very short workout. On days when I have the energy, it might be more like 30 sets. And then every day I'll do long walks, because that's just good to clear my head. Usually I'll jog a little bit for a while. I've started doing more cardio. For a long time, I was of the opinion that you don't need to do cardio if you're doing plenty of weights. And the research largely seems to support that, but my personal experience just doesn't. So I've definitely found the cardio, I mean, I just have more energy when I do it. I sleep better when I do cardio. It helps me with fat loss. So in theory, everything you get from cardio, you can get from doing weights, because that can get your heart rate up. I've found it's still worth doing extra cardio above and beyond the weight training. That may not be true for everyone. It has been true for me.
Do you do cardio every day as well?
Not every day, unless you consider long walks to be cardio, which in a way they are. But if we're only including running or jogging, no, that's maybe 4 days a week lately. And part of it too is,
what's your duration on that?
Maybe a half hour of kind of intermittent. I'll run or jog for a few minutes. I'll walk for a minute or two. And I got into that partly because I want to get back into sports. And I think I'm just going to need more stamina for the sport I want to play, So
nutrition wise, what are some of the things that you found have been helpful in your program that you feel really solid about?
Nutrition wise, number one, high protein breakfast all the time. Regardless of when that is. Breakfast, I don't mean first thing in the morning. It's whenever you feel ready to eat. So I don't, schedule permitting, I don't think you need to force yourself to eat first thing in the morning. But whatever your first meal of the day is, it needs to be very high in protein. And I think usually relatively low in carbs, just not no carb, but I think it just works better that way in terms of being slower digesting, giving you steadier blood sugar levels. And there's research that having a high protein breakfast is going to make the brain produce more dopamine, which will keep you awake more. And the other reason to have lower carbs in the morning, you want more of your carbs in the evening because that'll let the brain produce serotonin, which is then processed into melatonin. So it helps you sleep to have more of your carbs in the evening. And protein wise, I also just find it's best to have 3 or 4 good meals a day with a decent amount of protein. There is research that not only the amount of protein, but kind of spreading it out throughout the day is important. And that's because your body has no way of storing protein or amino acids other than about 50 grams of amino acids in your blood at any one time. And beyond that, it's your muscles. Your muscles are the fatty tissue of protein. So you
Right.
burn through the amino acids in your blood. You're breaking down muscle to get beyond that. And a lot of people say they don't care about building muscle. What people need to understand is for any given calorie balance, for any given level of calorie intake versus calorie burning, if you are building muscle, you have to be burning fat to make those numbers balance out. And then beyond that, of course, if you build more muscle, your basal metabolic rate goes up. You're also in a better position to stay healthy as you get older and start losing strength. So people need to understand this is important from a health standpoint. And then for me, the other thing is just eat more fruits and vegetables. I'm a guy who enjoys eating fruits and vegetables, but I'm not a guy who naturally loves to cook, which can be an issue for vegetables because they're not usually like ready to eat like fruits are. Like I have a bowl of apples right here on my dining table here. Just keep a bowl of fruit out where they're easy to reach. Keep some vegetables ready to eat. I think it's very important to recognize just how much human behavior is driven by convenience and by doing whatever feels like the default. You will eat way more fruit if you have fruit just sitting around in a bowl like this.
Totally. This is a big thing.
Yeah.
Used to be you walked in and there was a fruit bowl on people's tables.
Yeah.
When I was a kid. Now you don't see that. There's a bowl of candy or something,
Yeah. You will work out more if you keep your exercise gear kind of ready to go by the door. And in my case, I haven't been taking a bag to the gym. It's 2 blocks away. It's half of it's closed because of COVID. But I keep my weightlifting gloves, which are the only real gear I take right now. I just have them sitting right out there. I don't have to dig through and get them. The gym's 2 blocks away. And I picked this apartment, by the way, partly with that in mind, that I want to be as close as possible to the gym. I know I'll go more if it's a short walk compared to the mile plus away that my old gym and my old apartment were. So a lot of people will tell you to not be lazy, to try and work harder, which is good advice, but it takes time to change what kind of person you are. I would say recognize that you are lazy, and this isn't always a bad thing. It's because your brain has evolved to try and find the easiest way of doing things and the shortest route from point A to point B. But recognize that you're lazy and make doing the right thing easier than doing the wrong thing.
Yes.
Keep healthy food ready to eat. And a lot of people will say, don't keep junk food in your home. I would say, don't keep junk food ready to eat in your home. If I have a box of cookies, they're getting eaten. If I have a box of cake mix, it can sit there for a year and never get cooked. So it's only an issue to the degree that it's super convenient to just quickly consume. So go ahead and keep all the junk food that has to be cooked you want, assuming you're not someone who loves to cook. But keep some very easy, ready to eat fruit, yogurt, vegetables, carrot sticks. Make doing the healthy thing more convenient than doing the not healthy thing. So I keep my running shoes by the door. I keep my weightlifting gloves around. I keep my bed made and ready to sleep in. I don't wait till evening to do that. I make my bed in the morning. Just recognize the convenience factor and clear the time out of your schedule. Which for me, I work from home, flexible hours. This is something I tell other people to do. It tends to not be a major hurdle for me in any case. And then if you have something that's messing up your life, get rid of it. I mentioned video games earlier. Historically, I've loved video games. I got rid of most of them because I was just like, it's a time sink and I'd rather be working more or at least doing more productive hobby stuff. You know, anything that you find is kind of getting in the way of you being successful, ditch it, you know? I found external noise was bugging me a lot at my old place, so I started wearing headphones there. So if you, I guess the core idea here is solve your problems at the source, meaning get rid of them rather than find ways to put up with them.
Well, actually, I want to kind of go into particularly into one of the big issues I think that is facing society right now, and where a lot of research is going, is cognitive decline as people age. And then there's another axis, how much cognitive load is optimal, and then how do we maintain cognitive or improve cognitive capacity. And I think this is a very big topic because there's so many people in their aging communities which are really suffering from brain degeneration, which has horrific implications, not only for their own life, but also for those around them, especially as they get into, stages of dementia and progressions into Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and things like that. And there seems to be certain amount of evidence emerging that many of these things can be prevented if lifestyle, like their lifestyle, there's lifestyle controls that are involved. What are, when it comes to cognitive function, what are some of the things that you think that you've discovered that really work well to maintain cognitive function over time?
Over time, I mean, sleep is still number one. Another big research-based thing is glucose tolerance. I mean, there's a big link between Alzheimer's and other aging diseases and having kind of impaired glucose tolerance or insulin resistance. So do what it takes to get a handle on that, whether that's the keto diet, low carb, low fat. Mainly it's low calorie plus exercise regardless. But people need to recognize physical health and kind of brain health are not too far separated from each other. Another big thing is stress. I mean, stress will both directly and indirectly reduce your cognitive abilities. Indirectly, it'll stop you from making healthy decisions, which will in turn impact all areas of your health. But stress also directly makes people less intelligent and less able to focus. I mean, there are a lot of studies now that if you can manipulate subjects' stress levels, their IQ goes up and down immediately. I mean, immediately. And there are a lot of studies saying that, poor people tend to be less intelligent, not just because like they grew up with all the disadvantages and stuff, but literally just because they're poor and they get smarter as soon as their financial circumstances improve. Like there's a very, very interesting study out of India on farmers, and the farmers, of course, they have their annual harvest. And so they make most of their money for the year all at once. And this study found like you IQ test people before and after the harvest, their IQ went up like 10 or 15 points once they had some money in their pockets and they felt more secure, versus a couple months earlier when they knew the harvest was coming, that there was always some uncertainty about A, how good it would be, B, what the market price would be. So, I mean, the same people, their IQ goes up when they're safer. So obviously make more money isn't the most helpful advice, but save your money, you will be less stressed out and actually smarter for having financial security.
Yeah, I was listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson the other day, the kind of psychologist out of Toronto, and he had worked on a project in association with a guy that did this long-term study on what is the number one thing that we could do, the factors that would improve the environment, health, and social issues.
Mhm.
And there was two distinct factors I thought that was really profound in that.
Mhm.
Number one was, if you can increase the quality of nutrition in kids around the world, it would make a remarkable difference. The
Mhm.
second thing was at getting the mean average income of individuals to $5,000 a year. And so the nutrition made people make better choices and be able to go with
Yeah.
delayed gratification, get better educated, increase their finances. And then when people get around 5,000, they start to care about the environment.
Yeah.
You know, when you're not in, like you said, when they're not in this ultra stress, if you're not living in, if you've been to, anyone that's been to Mumbai, India, and gone
Yeah.
through like where they film Slumdog Millionaire, you're very clear
Yeah.
that you need to get past a certain point for you to even comprehend anything that's not just in like, how do I get through the day?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the environmentalism very much tends to be a thing for wealthier people because you have to have yourself taken care of before you can care that much about the world. I mean, and there are people around the world who are just like, well, I don't care. I need to shoot this monkey because I'm hungry, you know?
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, the nutrition thing is huge. I really wished, first off, that schools would provide free, super healthy lunches. I mean, be very strict about the nutrition. And two, I mean, I think there's a lot of room for the government to do more to fortify foods with nutrients. You know, I mean, we put like vitamin D in milk. We put, was it like niacin in bread? And they only did that a century ago
What's it
because,
called, enriched, after they stripped everything out of it?
yeah, and they only did that because we had like an epidemic of, I think it was rickets for vitamin D and pellagra for niacin. And so like, well, let's do the bare minimum to prevent people from literally dying. It's like, and you know, you don't want to overdo it because you can have too much of these things and none of this is going to be personalized. You don't know who needs how many nutrients or who's going to eat what. But having said that, I think the government could put some more vitamins and minerals. You have to err on the low side rather than the high side when you're doing this to everyone. But I do think that would help. And then if you combine that with, I mean, schools really serving healthier food and again making it free, I think it's really dumb that schools charge kids for food, and if they can't afford it, they don't get food because it's like it's so little money relative to what you spend on the school itself. And it, like he said, it makes a huge difference in terms of kids' cognitive abilities, their emotional skills, their behavior. I think trying to charge them for it is really penny wise, pound foolish, as they say.
And it bring up a great topic, and I'm not that hopeful that
Yeah.
governments are capable of agreeing on anything to systematize kind of national agendas, and therefore, you know, as individuals, I believe the more responsibility that we take for our own
Mhm.
nutrition individually, and I suspect over the next 20 or 30 years, I think we'll see micro societies start to emerge with kind of these kind of society values that we're now, because of the segmentation that's possible out of the internet and discourse, we essentially have these digital states where, okay, here's the biohackers and here's the people that are trying to live a long time and here's the people that are trying to put rockets on the moon, and now you can connect with a wide diversity of people. I suspect that will merge into people choosing to live in certain areas, very much like, hey, if you're in the financial industry, you're in London or New York, or maybe, well, before what was going on in Hong Kong or something like that.
Mhm.
You know, if you're in Silicon Valley, you're in San Francisco. If you're in the health industry, you're in California. You know, it's kind of like all these, you know, these various pockets where there's emerging factors. I think that might increase over time. What are some of the things that you do personally for cognitive enhancement? Because I know you got a wealth
Yeah.
of knowledge in that area to kind of be at your top of your game.
Yeah. I mean, so one thing I've done is, uh, I mean, really basic thing. I really play around with caffeine and with the balance of stimulants and depressants, mainly caffeine and theanine, the basic thing. So there's this thing called the Yerkes-Dodson law, which is basically that there is an optimal level of kind of mental and physiological arousal for any given task. Meaning you don't want to be too jazzed up, you don't want to be too tired. And it depends on the task. So if you look up the Yerkes-Dodson law, they'll divide it into two types of tasks, kind of high complexity, low complexity. So for a low complexity task like digging a ditch, you want to be very energized, because if you need physical energy, you don't need to be able to think too deeply. For a complex task like writing an article, you need somewhat less energy, because you need to be able to focus. Really, this is still an oversimplification. I would say for purely physical tasks, you want to have very high energy. For highly creative tasks, you want to have very relatively low energy. For mental but not super creative tasks, like just doing a bunch of math or kind of collating data, you want to be somewhere in the middle. Then there's also a kind of a sort of mixed mental and physical task, like playing most sports falls into this category where you need physical energy but also situational awareness.
Yep.
And then this also comes back to your default energy level. Some people are high energy by default, and almost any amount of caffeine is going to take their energy level too high for any non-physical task. Other people are more sedate. They will benefit more from caffeine rather than theanine. So this is something to play around with and find your optimal level of arousal for any given task. And so years ago, I experimented with an EEG headset called Versus to help me kind of learn to focus. And then I actually used it. I experimented with different levels of caffeine and used kind of the games that came with the headset to see what it did to my performance on those games. And of course, the games were pretty much purely mental. They were all you stare at a screen and focus. So I found pretty consistently it was a low amount of caffeine that was ideal for maximizing my performance in those games, which doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's ideal for any given task. So I also experimented with different levels of caffeine and different tasks that I was doing. And I found, again, if I was writing a blog article, a Diet Coke is good, 50 milligrams of caffeine. Now, I think it was closer to 100. Today, it would be more like 50. I just don't have as much caffeine now, because back then I was always having pre-workout before the gym and all that. I don't do that anymore. If I was lifting weights at the gym, 300 milligrams of caffeine was great, which again would just make me sick today, but that was ideal for me back then. Kind of going through Google Analytics, looking at math stuff for my business would be a slightly higher level of caffeine than compared to creative tasks. And then for mixed mental physical tasks, I was playing dodgeball at the time. And so I initially thought, well, having a bunch of pre-workout before the gym makes me really strong and gives me a lot of stamina. So that's probably what I should do before I play dodgeball, right? I should have a bunch of caffeine. And what I found was that when I did that, when I got incredibly amped up on caffeine and whatever else was in that pre-workout before playing dodgeball, I had incredible strength. I had berserker-like confidence. I had stamina. I felt invincible, and I constantly got hit by a ball coming from the side because I had no situational awareness. So I felt invincible, and I could have absolutely destroyed the guy in front of me, but the guy off to the side always got me.
Right.
So I
dodgy principles of dodgeball.
Yeah. So, I found I got pretty bad tunnel vision from that, in addition to insomnia, because the games were in the evening, so that wasn't right. So I used EEG headsets to kind of help train myself to focus and to relax better, and to kind of test my responses to caffeine. Again, those results would not be valid anymore because I just consume so much less caffeine these days. Another thing I do is I've gotten into using algorithmic music, which I always get it mixed up with a different website. I believe it's called Brain. Yes, brain.fm is what I use. It plays these computer-generated not songs, because there's no singing, but like kind of 2-hour bits of music to help you focus. I don't know why it works, but it does. Just listening to this music while I work really helps me focus a lot. And this is something
I read a book by years ago on super learning and how there is an entrainment factor by tuning yourself into Baroque music. And it's the way it starts firing. And I started to extrapolate by getting into sync. And then I would start switching the beats per minute into different things to kind of play with different alternative states. And I found that there was a correlation with how you change sounds. And now today I have I play in the background here different frequencies as I'm working, and that creates different vibes. And they're definitely, you know, I'm certainly not in an exact science on it, but I do absolutely notice difference in arousal level or focus level, or, you know, less focus. So maybe chill out music in the evening, you know, rock music if I'm going to go work out, and then kind of like these nice flutes and sounds when I'm kind of just chilling and focusing or whatever. And these interesting kind of.
And it's funny you say that. The music for focus, they have ones for like relaxing and sleeping too, but the focus music that I mainly use is like moderately high energy. It's not like heavy metal. But it's a little more high energy than probably your default energy level when you're just sitting in a chair. So I think it's just the amount to get you motivated to work without being so high energy that you're like, I want to get up and pace around. I don't want to sit. So I think it's pretty well kind of calculated to be right in that sweet spot. Another thing I do that helps me focus, and I don't quite understand why, is oxiracetam, one of the racetams. It, for whatever reason, and this was recommended to me by a guy named Jonathan Roseland, who's the same guy who recommended the algorithmic music to me. Oxiracetam it's not super well researched. It has a few apparent mechanisms of action, but I don't know what to attribute this to. It's just when I take it, I am less distractible. Like I am more likely to want to focus on my work and less likely to be like, no, I want to watch TV. I want to read a book. I want to do something else. I want to surf the internet. And I don't quite know whether to attribute that to increased GABA or decreased dopamine or what. I don't know how it works, but it just kind of does.
And I think I'd like to know, and I know I want to be mindful of your time, but I'd like to know what's your methodology, because I think what you're really illustrating here and sharing for our listeners, I think, which is really pertinent, is that you're setting up experiments and creating some sort of feedback system. And maybe you're setting up an experiment based on some research that you saw or whatever. And then you're like, okay, let me create a feedback system and let's run a test and then see what happens, and then play things around and, you know, throw away the things that don't work and then use the things that do. Did you just kind of come up with his own, or is that, do you think the key aspect of what it takes to be quote unquote a biohacker or a biologically optimizer, or like doing that? Like, because I think a lot of people are scared or hesitant to set up their own experiments.
Yeah. You know, I think if something sounds interesting to you, you just need to try it. But have a way of measuring your results and tracking what you did. So I used to use this spreadsheet. I think it's still on my personal website somewhere. But I would just record what I ate at what time, what kinds of work or activities I was doing at what time, supplements I took, when I slept. And every day I would record I can't remember if it was every day or every hour or what, but I would record my energy level, my mood, productivity level, and libido on a scale from 1 to 5. So 4 outcome measures. And I would see how what affected what else. And it worked very well, but it was a lot of work. There were a lot of things that had to be recorded several times a day. More recently, I've been using an app called Dailyo, which is maybe has less fidelity, but is just 100 times easier to use. Because every evening you record what all you did that day, just in general terms, what kinds of food you ate, did you eat, kind of meat, vegetables, healthy food, packaged food, which of these kinds of work did you do, which of these kinds of exercise, which of these kinds of social activity, how well did you sleep? And you record just kind of each day on a scale from 1 to 5, like how good of a day was it? So it doesn't separate the outcome measures. That's one thing I wish it did a bit better, is separate the outcome or the goal into multiple outcome measures. So you can kind of define for yourself whether am I rating my mood, my productivity, some weighted mix of both, which, and for me, it's a mix of both, which also does kind of muddy the waters of what I'm measuring. But the upside is it's very easy to stay consistent with compared to my homemade spreadsheet. So it's a more realistic option in terms of just what you're going to stick to. And it actually runs the statistical analysis for you, as opposed to me looking at my spreadsheet and just eyeballing it.
Right. What are any other devices or tracking equipment that you find valuable or useful, or do you like the old biofeedback method of just kind of recording moods, energy, patterns?
I use a fitness tracker. Right now I have a Garmin one that seems to be broken that I need to figure out. But I like fitness trackers they seem to really overestimate my calorie expenditure for some reason.
That's what I found too. It's like, come on, I didn't burn 1,000 calories.
Yeah.
Distance.
I don't know if it's because they're going off, like they're interpreting every arm movement as me walking, or if maybe they're overestimating heart rate or what. But yeah, I take the calories with a grain of salt, but they are good at measuring sleep, and they're good at measuring heart rate variability, which is a measure of your stress levels and your recovery status, how well you've recovered from workout. And so that's kind of a good way to gauge, like, how hard should I push myself versus recovering more. And it's better than just going off of how you feel. So I find it good for both of those.
What so maybe you can share with people a little bit about Unwinder, your work in the world, and how people can find out more, and who Unwinder is for.
Yeah, the Unwinder is for people who want to be healthy, want to be productive, maybe not quite hardcore biohackers. I would say it's probably for people who are interested in the kind of things biohackers are into and kind of want to take an 80-20 approach to it in terms of how much work they're willing to put into either taking a DIY approach to doing it or like scouring the internet for all the information, right? So it is for people who are willing to spend the time and money on kind of supplements, on devices, who really want to be healthy, want to be productive. I would say a lot of tech people are probably in our audience. I have a feeling that's our core audience, is tech and maybe medical people. So it's for people who are like that, who want it to be research-based, who don't want to do the work of like actually having to become experts on everything themselves, but who do want to make sure that what they're reading is evidence-based and it's taking into account all of the research. So that's really, it's kind of trying to demystify a lot of this more cutting edge stuff, whether it is magnesium, whether it is like the best natural alternatives to Adderall or senolytics or whatever. And so that's who it is. It's kind of the like not hardcore, but fairly motivated, evidence-based health and fitness and productivity crowd. The people who want maybe, I would say you want to be a biohacker without quite going to the level of setting up your own experiments, is a good way of putting it.
Beautiful.
You want to know what is likely to work for you, maybe narrow it down to try these few options, but not like have to run a ton of experiments on yourself that you designed yourself. So not super hardcore, but willing to put in some work and want to know what the research says.
Love it. It's really great. And can you share with everybody where they can find you, reach you, and follow your research and information, your articles that you're doing?
Yeah. So the Unwinder's website is the-unwinder.com. It's UNWINDER. My own website is johnfawkes.com. I haven't really been super diligent about updating it. You can also find both me personally and the Unwinder on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is, I am official John Fawkes. The Unwinder is, I mean, you're going to tell people how to spell my name, right? It's Fawkes.
Yeah.
The Unwinder on Instagram, the Unwinder is the .unwinder. And then on Twitter, I am just John Fawkes on Twitter. And the Unwinder is the _unwinder. So different punctuation for every place that you find the Unwinder. So that's, we post stuff on Instagram and Twitter and also on our websites. I mean, a lot of my old stuff on johnfawkes.com is still good. Someday I will start updating it more than once every month or two. Most of the action right now is going to be on the Unwinder. You know, we put articles up there several times a week and that's most of the supplement stuff is going to be on the Unwinder too. That's the majority of our focus these days.
Super fun, super cool. Any closing thoughts or intentions for the audience before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say start with the basics. You know, it's easy to get down the rabbit hole of supplements and stuff. Remember that they are supplements in the sense of being add-ons to the fundamentals of diet and exercise. And second, remember that information is meant to be used. It's also easy to fall into this trap of reading a lot of stuff out of sheer intellectual curiosity. And intellectual curiosity is a great trait for people to have, but make sure you are putting that information to use and doing stuff with it. Balance taking in information and taking action.
Very cool. I think that's really good. Don't get too addicted to the dopamine of information and get into the adrenaline of hitting the gym, hitting the workouts, doing the work, and winding down properly for a good night's rest. And that'll give you on the pathway. As they say, you cannot supplement your way out of a bad lifestyle, but the right supplement in conjunction with a great lifestyle can lead to a better sense of well-being. So exactly. I hope our listeners will come and check out your site. I think you're doing a great service to the world and helping people sort through the wheat from the chaff when it comes to supplementation and using evidence and research-based. And we're very much in support of that kind of thinking and that kind of application of our brains in this very complex and sometimes confusing space, or, you know, in the health and wellness industry. So thanks so much for joining us. It's Mr. John Fawkes. You can find him on the-unwinder.com. Of course, all the show notes will be in here, as well as all the references for your listening pleasure. I want to thank you for joining us today on the Awesome Health Podcast. I'm Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers. See you later.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.